The moon of Kasvar hung silent in the darkness of space, orbiting a dead planet that nobody remembered anymore. Only the moon mattered now because of what stood on its surface. Obelisk rose 200 meters into the thin atmosphere, a perfect monument of black material that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. For 847 galactic standard years, and it stood there unchanged, waiting, silent, mysterious beyond all understanding. Dr. Thelnox pressed his 4 hands against the observation window of the research station and watched the obelisk like he had done every day for the past 40 years. His compound eyes could detect wavelengths of light that most species couldn't see. But the obelisk looked the same in every spectrum. Black, unknowable, covered in glyphs that shifted and changed but never revealed their meaning. "Still no progress?" asked his assistant, a young VRTANI named Shizes, who had only been at the Institute for 3 years. "Progress requires change." Thelnox clicked in his species language, his mandibles moving with frustration. "The obelisk does not change. We are the ones who change, growing older and more desperate while it simply exists." The Institute of Obelisk Studies had grown around the monument like a city. 300 researchers from 47 different species, all dedicated to solving the same puzzle that had defied every civilization in the known galaxy. Some believed it was a beacon left by the precursors, the ancient civilization that had vanished millions of years ago, leaving only ruins and questions. Others thought it was a test, a lock that would open only when the right key was found. A few had started to believe it was nothing more than art, a cosmic joke played on the younger species, who thought everything must have a purpose. Elenox didn't know what he believed anymore in the main research hall. A quantum harmonics team from the Delphic Collective worked with equipment that cost more than a small planet's economy. They projected 7-dimensional mathematical proofs onto the obelisk's surface, each calculation perfect, each proof elegant beyond mortal comprehension. Nothing happened in the Eastern Wing. A circle of psionic masters from Ithara sat in meditation. Their combined mental power enough to move asteroids, they reached out with their consciousness, trying to touch whatever mind or machine intelligence might exist within the black stone. The obelisk remained silent. Another failure to log, Shizes said quietly, updating the endless database of attempts over the centuries. The methods had grown increasingly sophisticated, temporal displacement fields that tried to communicate across time, quantum entanglement messaging that operated outside normal space, harmonic resonance patterns that matched the background radiation of the universe itself. Every attempt had failed. "The humans are arriving today," Shizes mentioned. Changing the subject, Thelnox turned from the window. "Humans? The newcomers? They joined the Galactic Council only 30 years ago," Shizes confirmed, pulling up the information on a holographic display. "Apparently, they requested permission to study the obelisk. The council approved it as a diplomatic courtesy." Thelnox felt something close to amusement. Humanity was so new to galactic civilization that most species still considered them children playing at science. How generous of the council. He clicked. "I suppose we should make them feel welcome before they realize they've come all this way for nothing." The human ship arrived 3 hours later. It was called the Curiosity's Price, which Thelnox thought was either very appropriate or very ironic. 3 humans emerged from the docking port. A woman named Dr. Sarah Chun, who led their research team, a man called Marcus Webb, who was their engineer, and another woman named Keiko Tanaka, who piloted their ship. Thelnox greeted them in the common trade language that most species used, his translator device making his clicks and chirps understandable. "Welcome to the Institute. I am Dr. Thelnox, senior researcher. I have been studying the obelisk for 40 of your years." Sarah Chen smiled, which Thelnox had learned was a friendly human gesture. "Thank you for having us. We're honored to be here. I must be honest with you," Thelnox said. gesturing with two of his hands toward the massive window that showed the obelisk. 847 years of the galaxy's best minds have attempted to unlock that monument. We have tried everything that science and philosophy can imagine. You are welcome to try as well. But you should not expect success where so many have failed. Marcus Webb, the engineer, looked at the obelisk with an expression Thelmox couldn't quite read. Humans were still difficult for him to understand sometimes. Can we review the previous attempts? Sarah asked. I'd like to see what's been tried. Of course. Thelmox led them to the archive hall, where holographic records of every documented attempt floated in organized chaos. We have records going back to the obelisk's discovery. The Gentari tried first, using their crystalline computing matrices. Then the Ulathi attempted quantum linguistic analysis. He watched as the humans studied the records, their faces showing concentration. They seemed particularly interested in the physical contact attempts. Has anyone just touched it normally? Keiko Asked answered before Thelmox could. Thousands of attempts involving physical contact, pressure sequences following mathematical constants, temperature variations, even attempts to leave biological markers. Nothing has ever produced a response. But complex patterns, Marcus said. More to himself than to them. Everyone's trying to prove they're smart enough. Intelligence is required to unlock precursor technology, Thelmox said firmly. Though he noticed a slight defensive tone in his own voice, Sarah was quiet, studying the obelisk through the window. The glyphs on its surface shifted slowly, never repeating, never stopping, never making sense. May we approach it? She asked. Whenever you wish. Thelmox gestured toward the airlock. The surface is safe to touch. We verified that much at least, though I warn you, you will likely feel disappointed. The obelisk has a way of making even the most brilliant beings feel small. The three humans suited up and took the transport pod down to the moon's surface. Thelmox watched from the observation deck, feeling a mixture of sympathy and something else he couldn't quite name. They would try, they would fail, and they would leave, just like so many others before them, but at least they were trying. That counted for something. Even if it counted for nothing in the end on the surface. Sarah-chan stood before the obelisk, her suited hand raised but not quite touching. Even through the video feed, Thelmox could see her hesitation. The moment of doubt that everyone felt when confronted with something so far beyond understanding. Then she lowered her hand, and the three humans walked around the base, observing, discussing in voices too quiet for the external microphones to pick up clearly. They would be back tomorrow. Thelmox knew. Everyone always came back. Unable to resist the pull of the mystery, the obelisk stood silent, waiting, keeping its secrets as it had done for nearly a millennium, and the galaxy continued to wonder what it would take to make it speak. Sarah-chan sat in the small quarters assigned to the human delegation, surrounded by holographic displays showing 8 centuries of failure. Each attempt was documented in meticulous detail. Each theory explored from every possible angle. They've tried everything, Marcus said from across the room, scrolling through his own set of records. Mathematical sequences, quantum entanglement, harmonic resonance, telepathic contact, temporal messaging. There's even a group that tried praying to it in 4,000 different languages. Not everything, Keiko said quietly, floating a particular record to the center of the room. It showed a Delphic researcher in full ceremonial robes, performing an elaborate ritual that had taken 6 months to prepare. Look at this. 6 months of preparation, 3 weeks of continuous ceremony. And the moment of contact lasted exactly 0.03 seconds. Sarah leaned forward, studying the documentation. What are you seeing? Effort, Keiko replied. Massive, elaborate, complex effort. Every single attempt is trying to prove something. Look at the language they use in their reports, demonstrating our worthiness, proving our intellectual capacity. showing our understanding of universal constants. Marcus stood up and walked to the window where the obelisk was visible in the distance. When my tablet freezes back home, I don't run a diagnostic program. I just turn it off and back on again. Or I tap it twice and wait. You think an ancient precursor monument is like your frozen tablet? Sarah asked, but there was curiosity in her voice rather than mockery. No. Marcus turned back to face them. But what if it's designed by beings who valued simplicity? What if all these elaborate attempts are exactly what it's programmed to ignore? Sarah pulled up another set of records, physical contact attempts. There were thousands of them, but every single one followed complex patterns. Pressure applied in Fibonacci sequences. Temperatures modulated to match stellar radiation curves. Contact points arranged according to quantum probability distributions. They're all sophisticated, she observed. Even the simple approaches are wrapped in layers of theory and meaning. Keiko expanded the hologram to show the obelisk's surface in high resolution. The black material was smooth like glass. Almost like it looks like a screen, she said suddenly. A display surface. What if that's exactly what it is? Not a monument, not a test chamber. Just a device with a user interface. A device that's been off for who knows how long, Marcus added, picking up her thought. And everyone's been trying to hack into it instead of just turning it on. Sarah stood and walked around the hologram, viewing the obelisk from different angles. That's a big assumption based on surface appearance. Is it though? Keiko pulled up comparison images, precursor artifacts from other dig sites, all of which had smooth, screen-like surfaces when inactive. Every piece of precursor technology we found has this same characteristic: smooth, dark, inactive until properly engaged. But properly engaged how? Sarah asked the question that mattered. Marcus smiled. On Earth, when we want to wake up a device, we tap it, usually twice. It's almost instinctive now. Tap, tap, are you awake? The three of them looked at each other in the sudden silence. That's insane, Sarah said finally. Is it more insane than spending 800 years trying increasingly complex solutions? Keiko countered. Sarah pulled up the safety protocols for the obelisk. Physical contact was permitted. No harmful effects had ever been recorded. The surface remained at a constant temperature, regardless of external conditions. We be the laughingstock of the Institute, she said. But her fingers were already working through the approach permissions. We're already not taken seriously, Marcus pointed out. The established researchers think we're tourists playing scientist, at worst. We confirm what they already believe, at best. At best we look like idiots who got lucky, Sarah finished. But she was smiling now. The next morning, Thalmox found the humans in the archive hole again, reviewing records with an intensity that surprised him. Most new researchers gave up after the first day, overwhelmed by the sheer scope of previous failures. You are persistent. He clicked approvingly. That is good. The obelisk rewards patience, even if it rewards nothing else. Dr. Thalmox? Sarah asked. In all the physical contact attempts, has anyone ever just tapped it? Like, casually? Thalmox's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement. Define casually. We have records of over 10,000 distinct physical contact methodologies. No. I mean, Sarah struggled to explain. Not following a pattern or proving a theory. Just walking up and tapping it like you tap someone on the shoulder to get their attention. Thalmox considered this. Every physical interaction has been carefully planned and executed according to specific hypotheses. Spontaneous contact would be unscientific. That's what I thought, Sarah said, exchanging glances with her team. May I ask why you're interested in unsuccessful methodologies? Thalmox inquired. Just trying to understand what hasn't been tried, Marcus answered. Which was technically true. Joined them, carrying data tablets. Dr. Chun. I have the spectral analysis reports you requested. The obelisk's surface composition is still unknown, but it absorbs 99.7% of electromagnetic radiation across all tested frequencies, like a screen that's turned off, Keiko muttered. Quiet enough that only the other humans heard. That afternoon, Sarah requested permission for a surface visit. Felnox approved it readily, assuming they wanted to examine the obelisk more closely like all newcomers did. The observation shift changes in 3 hours. Shizis mentioned helpfully. If you want privacy for your examination, the minimal staffing period is usually quiet. Sarah thanked him, not mentioning that privacy was exactly what she wanted, though for different reasons than he assumed, as the 3 humans prepared their surface suits. Marcus voiced the doubt they were all feeling. What if we're completely wrong? What if this is the dumbest idea anyone's ever had? Then we'll be in good company, Keiko said, sealing her helmet. 800 years of the galaxy's best minds couldn't figure it out. At least our failure will be quick. Sarah checked her suit seals one final time. If I'm right, the precursors weren't looking for complexity. They were looking for someone who could see past it, someone who would treat their technology like a tool instead of a temple. And if you're wrong? Marcus asked. Then we go home with a good story about hubris and humility. Sarah replied. They took the transport pod down during the shift change, when most researchers were either heading to rest or preparing for their own observation periods. The obelisk stood alone on the gray surface of Kesvar, black against the star field up close. It was overwhelming. 200 meters of perfect geometry, covered in glyphs that moved like living things, each symbol complex enough to represent entire libraries of meaning. Or maybe, Sarah thought, they were just loading animations, waiting screens, the visual equivalent of an hourglass icon. She stepped forward alone, leaving Marcus and Keiko a few meters back. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her suit helmet. This was either brilliant or incredibly stupid, and she was about to find out which. She raised her gloved hand, took a breath, and remembered every time she'd woken up a sleeping tablet or tapped a frozen screen, just 2 taps casual. Expectant, the universal gesture for hello. Are you awake? Her knuckles touched the surface once. Tap then, again. Tap and nothing happened. Sarah felt disappointment crash over her like a wave. Of course nothing happened. How arrogant to think that a simple gesture could unlock what centuries of genius couldn't. Then the glyphs stopped moving for the first time in 847 years. The symbols on the obelisk's surface froze in place, and the universe held its breath. For 3 heartbeats, Sarah stood frozen, watching the symbols on the obelisk's surface remain perfectly still. 8 centuries of constant motion had stopped at the touch of her gloved hand. The black surface began to ripple like liquid mercury disturbed by a stone. Waves of movement spreading from where her knuckles had made contact. The material remained solid under her touch, but looked fluid, alive, responsive. Then sound came. The first sound the obelisk had ever made according to every record in the Institute's vast archives. A soft tone that resonated through the thin atmosphere and through the ground itself. Felt as much as heard. Sarah stumbled backward, her breath caught in her throat. Marcus and Keiko rushed forward to steady her, but all 3 humans stood transfixed as the obelisk transformed before their eyes. The rippling surface smoothed into perfect clarity. The shifting glyphs dissolved like mist and text appeared. Clean and simple and utterly impossible. User interface LOADWS Mometer. Words were in English. Perfect. Modern, Earth Standard English. Oh my God, Keiko whispered. That's not possible, Marcus said. Even as he watched it happen, Sarah's hand was shaking. She reached out again, touching the surface with trembling fingers. The moment she made contact, new text appeared. Language preferences confirmed primary user identity awaiting IMP back at the Institute. Alarms began screaming. Every monitoring system connected to the obelisk was registering changes that should have been impossible. Thelnox was in his quarters when the alerts hit his console. And for a moment, he thought it was a malfunction in the sensors. Then he saw the readings and his 4 hearts seemed to stop beating. The obelisk was active. He ran, all 6 of his legs moving faster than they had in years. Other researchers were emerging from their quarters, their workstations, the dining halls. Everyone was running toward the observation deck or the transport. Batius met him in the corridor. "Doctor, the obelisk, the readings." "I know." Thelnox didn't stop moving. "Who's down there? Which team got permission?" "The humans," Shiza said, pulling up the log on a mobile display. "Dr. Chun's team. They went down during the shift change." Thelnox felt something between awe and anger. The newcomers, the species barely 3 decades in the galactic community, had done what 8 centuries of brilliance could note in the surface. Sarah was learning to navigate the interface. It responded to simple touch commands, intuitive gestures that felt natural to her human hands. Swipe left, swipe right, tap to select. Press and hold for options. "It's designed like a smartphone," she said, wonder in her voice. "Or a tablet basic. Simple. User-friendly. But in English," Marcus pointed out. "Why English?" "We've only been in space for a few generations. Language adaptation complete." The screen displayed, as if responding to his question. Interface reflects primary user linguistic pattern scurry. System functions, OR, historical records. Sarah's mind was racing. They needed to document this. Needed to understand what was happening before. The transport pods were launching from the Institute. She could see them on the horizon, racing toward the obelisk's location. "We don't have much time," Keiko said urgently. "They're coming." Sarah made a decision. She tapped. Historical RSORs, the screen filled with text. But not all at once. It presented information in digestible chunks, waiting for her to scroll before showing more. It was teaching her. She realized, adapting to her pace Obelisk designation. Universal Archive and Fabrication Facility purpose. Preservation and transmission of precursor knowledge security protocol. Activation requirement. Demonstration of practical intelligence and humility. Humility? Marcus read over her shoulder. Sarah scrolled down. More text appeared. Failed activation attempts. 847,293 common failure mode. Supplicants approach with assumption of worthiness. Common failure mode. Excessive complexity, indicating need to prove intelligence. Failure mode. Demands rather than requests. They were all trying too hard. Keiko breathed, trying to prove they deserved it. Successful activation criteria met. The display continued. Simple inquiry without pretense. Gesture analysis. Casual expectation without arrogance. Interpretation. Are you awake? Treating system as entity rather than pews. Sarah laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. I just tapped it twice. That's all. Like waking up my tablet. Correct. The obelisk responded. Precursor design philosophy. Advanced technology should serve all beings. Not only those who prove superiority. Wisdom requires knowing. When simple solutions are sufficient, the first transport pod was landing. Thelnox emerged from it so quickly he nearly fell in the lower gravity. Followed by a dozen other senior researchers, they stopped at the edge of the cleared zone around the obelisk, staring at what had been a silent monument for their entire lives, and was now a glowing interactive display. Sarah turned to face them. Still touching the obelisk's surface, the connection was important. She sensed. It had bonded to her as the primary user. Dr. Thelnox, she said formally. The obelisk has activated. It's a precursor archive and fabrication facility. It contains their accumulated knowledge and technology. Thelnox moved forward slowly. as if approaching something sacred or dangerous. How? What did you do? I tapped it twice, Sarah said simply. Like waking up a sleeping device. That's impossible, said a Delphic researcher who had spent 60 years attempting quantum harmonics approaches. We tried every form of physical contact, but you followed patterns, Marcus interjected. Mathematical sequences, pressure variations, temperature modulations. You were all trying to prove you were smart enough to unlock it. The obelisk's display changed, visible to everyone now. 847 years of attempts, analyze Z0 successful. Activations prior to current use Narration. All previous attempts demonstrated arrogance or desperation on an approach. Casual inquiry based on practical expectation. Casual inquiry? A Theran telepath said in disbelief. 8 centuries of the galaxy's finest minds, and it wanted casual inquiry? Affirmative. The obelisk displayed precursor wisdom. Those who must prove their worth often lack those who approach with humility and practical intent, demonstrate true understanding. Tholes felt his worldview cracking 40 years of his life, dedicated to elaborate theories and complex approaches. And the answer had been simple all along. What now? He asked Sarah, his voice quiet. Sarah looked at the obelisk. Then, at the gathering crowd of researchers, more transport pods were landing. More species arriving to witness the impossible. Now we learn what it wants to teach us, she said, turning back to the interface, and we figure out what happens next. She scrolled through the menu options. The list was extensive. Knowledge archives, fabrication templates, medical databases, energy systems, propulsion technology, defensive systems, offensive SYST, MS. That last category made her pause. Power, weapons, tools of control, and destruction. Cure we are from primary user? The obelisk prompted Sarah realize she was being tested again. What she requested would reveal her intentions. Humanity's intentions. Perhaps the intentions of their entire species. The galaxy's most powerful technology was literally at her fingertips, waiting to see what she would do with it. Give me a minute, she said to the waiting researchers. To Thelnox, to everyone watching, take your time, Thelnox said. And for the first time since the humans had arrived, there was no condescension in his voice, only respect. Sarah Chun, 30 years a member of the Galactic Council, stood before a monument older than most civilizations and tried to decide what kind of person she wanted to be. What kind of species humanity would prove itself to be. The obelisk waited patiently, as it had waited for 847 years, but now it was awake, and the galaxy would never be the same. Sarah stood before the obelisk for 3 hours while the galaxy held its breath. Transport pods kept arriving until the landing area around the monument looked like a small city. Researchers from every species, pressing as close as security would allow. The Galactic Council had been notified. Emergency session called. Diplomatic channels burning with urgent communications. Humanity, the newcomers, had activated a precursor facility that entire civilizations had failed to unlock inside the observation deck of the Institute. Thelnox had established a command center. Holographic displays showed the obelisk from every angle, monitored energy reading, recorded every change in the interface. She hasn't moved in an hour, she's observed, watching Sarah through the high-resolution cameras. She's reading, Thelnox said quietly. Zooming in on the human's face, her eyes moved constantly, following text that only she could see. The obelisk is showing her something important enough that she's ignoring everything else. What Sarah was reading would have shocked them. The obelisk had opened its historical archives at her request, showing her not just precursor technology, but precursor history, and it was a warning. The precursors had been brilliant. The records showed they had mastered physics, energy, matter, space and time itself. They had built wonders that made current galactic civilization look primitive. And They had destroyed themselves, not through war. Though they had weapons that could crack planets, not through disaster. Though they had accidentally created phenomena that still existed as hazards in deep space, they had destroyed themselves through arrogance pre-eraser civilization collapse analysis. The obelisk displayed for Sarah's eyes only. Primary cause. Belief in supremacy. Secondary cause. Refusal to acknowledge limitations. Thermal cause. Technological advancement without WSD. Records showed it clearly. The precursors had reached a point where they believed themselves above nature, above consequence, above the need for humility or caution. They had made their final mistake with such confidence that they never saw the end coming, and before they vanished, they had built these archives, obelisks placed throughout the galaxy, waiting for the next intelligent species to rise, hoping that someone would learn from their mistakes. QSTION for primary user. The interface prompted, "What drives your species to seek this knowledge?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. The obelisk could likely detect lies. And besides, honesty seemed important here. She spoke aloud, knowing the obelisk would interpret her words. "We want to understand. We want to grow. We want to survive and help others survive. But also, yes, we want power and advantage and security. We're not perfect. We're just trying to be better than we were." Acceptable response. The obelisk displayed. Self-awareness of imperfection indicates wisdom. Species without acknowledged flaws cannot improv proceed with archive ACs. And then Sarah saw everything. Medical technology that could eliminate disease. Energy systems that could power entire worlds without environmental cost. Propulsion designs that made current FTL look like a child's toy. Fabrication methods that could create anything from raw matter. She also saw weapons. Terrible. Efficient civilization-ending weapons. Why show me the weapons? She asked. If the precursors wanted to teach wisdom, why include their tools of destruction? Because knowledge cannot be incomplete, the obelisk responded. To hide dangerous information suggests belief that users cannot be trusted. Trust requires. Showing everything to show everything requires trusting in user wisdom. That's a hell of a gamble. Sarah muttered. Pure Sarasoa civilization was built on certainty. The display continued. Certainty LED to downfall current. Archive system is built on hope. Hope requires UNCRT. I smiled despite herself. Even the precursor's final gift was a lesson in humility. She began cataloging what she saw. Medical databases that would revolutionize galactic healthcare. Energy systems clean and unlimited. Educational tools that adapted to any learning style or biological structure. Hours passed. The sun that Kesvar orbited moved across the sky. The gathered researchers grew restless, demanding updates, answers, access. Finally, Sarah stepped back from the obelisk. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and faced with a decision that felt impossibly large. Marcus and Keiko approached her. "What did you see?" Marcus asked. "Everything," Sarah said simply. "Enough technology to change the galaxy, enough weapons to destroy it, and a really clear warning about what happens when a civilization thinks it has all the answers. So what do we do?" Keiko asked the question that mattered. Sarah looked at the crowd of researchers, at Thelnox watching from the Institute, at the transport pods still arriving from orbit. She thought about Earth, about the Galactic Council, about 8 centuries of failure and 1 moment of success. "I think," she said slowly, "I need to make a choice that the precursors would approve of." She turned back to the obelisk and placed her hand on its surface. The interface sprang to life immediately. Awaiting input from primary user, Sarah took a deep breath and began typing. Not in the search functions, not in the archives, but in the command interface. Request. Educational protocols request. Teaching tools for all. Special request. Open access emitter why the obelisk course for several seconds. Nothing happened, and Sarah wondered if she had broken something. If there was a limit to what could be requested, then new text appeared. Query. Primary. User requests knowledge sharing with non-users. Query. Primary user requests elimination of exclusive access. Confirm. This will remove human species advantage. Confirmed, Sarah said firmly. If the lesson is humility, then hoarding this knowledge would be the opposite of what the precursors wanted to teach. If I'm worthy to activate this because I kept it simple, then everyone else should have the chance to learn the same lesson. Unprecedented request. The obelisk displayed. Analysis Recuries. Sarah waited behind her. Thelnox had arrived on the surface, approaching carefully with Shizis and several other senior researchers. Dr. Chen, Thelnox said formally. The Galactic Council is requesting immediate communication. They want to know what you intend to do with the obelisk's access. I'm giving it away, Sarah said. Watching the obelisk process her request. Giving what away? Thelnox asked, confused. Everything. The exclusive access. The human advantage, all of it. I'm asking the obelisk to teach everyone how to use it. Not just me. The researchers around her reacted with shock. Some with approval, others with alarm. Several with immediate calculations about what this would mean for their own species. Positions in the galactic hierarchy are request approved. The obelisk suddenly displayed in letters large enough for everyone to see. Educational protocols activate open access methodology, implement tidal species, may now approach for INSTIO and the surface of the obelisk transformed. What had been a single interface point became dozens, then hundreds of smaller access nodes, each one glowing with soft light and EW instruction protocol. The display announced. Approach without pretense request with humility learn with openness simple gestures required. Tap twice to begin. Thelnox stared at the transformed monument. You're teaching them the double tap. You're showing everyone what worked for you. If we're worthy because we kept it simple, Sarah said, then the answer isn't gatekeeping. It's helping everyone see what we saw. The precursors wanted to teach wisdom, not create a hierarchy. A Delphic researcher stepped forward hesitantly. She approached one of the glowing nodes and, mimicking Sarah's earlier action, tapped twice with her crystalline hand. The node lit up. Text appeared in Delphic linguistic patterns. While Commissar interface load awaiting IMPUT, the researcher made a sound of pure joy. Others rushed forward, each finding their own node, each performing the simple gesture that 8 centuries of complexity had obscured. Thelnox approached Sarah, his compound eyes showing an emotion she recognized as respect. You could have claimed this for humanity. Exclusive access to precursor technology. Your species would have leaped ahead of civilizations thousands of years older. And we would have learned nothing, Sarah replied. The obelisk didn't activate because I was smart or because humans are special. It activated because I treated it like a tool instead of a trophy. Hoarding, it would prove I missed the entire point. The Council will not be pleased, Thelnox warned. There are species who will see this as throwing away humanity's greatest advantage. Then they'll also miss the point, Sarah said firmly. But she knew he was right. There would be political consequences, economic ramifications, security concerns and OTIFICON for primary user. The obelisk displayed on Sarah's interface. Wisdom demonstrated through choice precursor. Archives fully accessible Rakondan. Guide others in responsible use. It's asking me to teach, Sarah said wonderingly. Not to control, not to restrict, just to teach. Around them, the moon of Kesvar was transforming into something it had never been. Not just a research station, but a school, a library, a gift from a dead civilization to the living galaxy. And Sarah Chun, human, newcomer, keeper of secrets she had chosen to share, stood at the center of it all, and hoped she had made the right choice. The Obelisk glowed with the light of 1,000 active interfaces. And for the first time in 847 years, it had a purpose beyond weighing. It was teaching the galaxy to ask simple questions, and the galaxy, finally, was ready to learn. 3 months after the activation, the moon of Kesvar had become the most important location in the known galaxy. What had been a research station housing 300 beings now supported over 50,000. With more arriving every day, the Galactic Council had held 17 emergency sessions. Some species praised humanity's wisdom in sharing the obelisk's knowledge, while others condemned it as strategic foolishness that gave away a decisive advantage. Earth's government had sent 4 separate delegations to speak with Sarah, each one asking variations of the same question. Why did you give away the greatest discovery in human history? Sarah's answer never changed, because keeping it would have proven we learned nothing from finding it. The obelisk itself had transformed. Its surface was now a constantly shifting tapestry of interfaces, each one adapted to a different species' biology and cognition. V. Ratani researchers accessed it through pheromone-based commands. Delphic scholars used crystalline resonance, and humans still just tapped it twice. Falnox had become an unlikely ally after 40 years of complex theories proven wrong by a simple gesture. He had embraced what he called the humility of effectiveness. He now taught newcomers the same lesson Sarah had stumbled upon: approach without pretense, ask without arrogance. The hardest part, he often told his students, is unlearning the need to prove you're worthy. The obelisk doesn't care about your credentials or your species' achievements. It cares about your approach. Not everyone learned the lesson. There were still researchers who spent weeks developing elaborate contact protocols, convinced that their method would unlock deeper levels of access. The obelisk responded to them the same way it had for 8 centuries, with silence. But those who approached simply, who tapped twice and waited, who treated the monument as a teacher rather than a test, they found themselves welcomed into archives of knowledge that spanned millions of years. Sarah stood in what had become known as the human wing of the expanded institute. It was a designation she disliked but couldn't change, a reminder that her species would forever be associated with the obelisk's awakening. Marcus worked nearby, collaborating with a team of engineers from 6 different species on precursor fabrication technology. They had successfully created a small-scale version that could produce basic materials. Though they were decades away from understanding the full complexity, Earth wants us to come home, he said, without looking up from his work. Government dispatch came through this morning. They want to properly recognize our contributions to galactic science. They want to parade us around and claim credit, Sarah translated. That too, Marcus agreed, finally meeting her eyes. Are you going? Sarah looked out at the obelisk through the observation window. It glowed softly in the darkness, a beacon that had waited 8 centuries to be seen for what it was. Not yet, she said. There's too much work here, too many people still trying to prove they're smart enough instead of just being willing to learn. Keiko entered the wing carrying data tablets. She had become the informal coordinator between human researchers and the broader galactic community, a role that suited her diplomatic nature. The Atharan Collective is sending a formal apology, she announced. Apparently, they finally admitted that 60 years of attempted telepathic contact was excessive when a simple tactile inquiry would have sufficed. Those are their exact words. Sarah laughed. It felt good to laugh. After months of political pressure and diplomatic complications, any word from the Council on the access protocols? Marcus asked. They're still arguing, Keiko reported, sitting down with a sigh. The Delphic Collective wants to restrict weapon fabrication templates. The Gentari think that's censorship. The Ulathi are proposing a complex licensing system that would require approval for advanced technology access, which defeats the entire purpose, Sarah said with frustration. The Obelisk gave us everything because it trusted us to be wise enough to handle it. Creating new barriers just proves we haven't learned anything. Not everyone sees it that way, Keiko said gently. Some species are scared. They spent centuries as the technological leaders, and now everyone has access to the same knowledge base. The balance of power is shifting, and that's terrifying for those who benefited from the old system. Sarah knew she was right. In 3 months, galactic civilization had changed more than in the previous 3 centuries. Medical advances were saving billions of lives. Energy shortages were becoming historical problems. And conflicts that had simmered for generations were being resolved through technologies that made old grievances irrelevant. But there was also fear. Fear of change. Fear of equality. Fear that democratizing knowledge would lead to chaos. The Obelisk had anticipated this. Its archives included extensive documentation of precursor attempts to manage their own technological advancement, complete with warnings about what happened when knowledge was hoarded versus when it was shared. The precursors tried both approaches. Sarah had told the council during one particularly heated session. Restricted access led to internal conflicts and eventual collapse. Open sharing created periods of unprecedented cooperation. They learned, over millions of years, that wisdom comes from trust, not control. Not everyone had appreciated the history lesson Telnox found Sarah in the observation lounge late that evening. The obelisk was visible through the transparent dome, surrounded by the lights of thousands of active research stations. "You should eat," he said, settling beside her with a grace that still surprised her. 6 legs made for efficient movement. "Humans require regular nutrition, and you've been here for 12 hours. So divertini," Sarah pointed out. "When did you last eat?" 16 hours ago, Telnox admitted. "But I have 4 stomachs. I can afford to skip a meal. You cannot." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the obelisk work, even from this distance. They could see the interfaces lighting up as researchers made contact. Asked questions, received answers. "Do you regret it?" Telnox asked suddenly. Sharing the access, giving away what could have been humanity's exclusive advantage. Sarah considered the question seriously. "Ask me in 100 years. Right now. I think I did the right thing in a century. We'll know if I was right or if I was naive." The precursors waited millions of years, Telnox observed. They built these archives hoping that eventually someone would approach with wisdom. You gave them that. Perhaps the galaxy needs another few centuries to catch up to what you understood in a moment. "I didn't understand anything," Sarah said honestly. "I just tapped it twice because my tablet does the same thing when it freezes. I stumbled into wisdom by accident. The best wisdom often comes accidentally," Telnox replied. "Those who seek it too deliberately usually miss it entirely. I spent 40 years proving that." Notification appeared on Sarah's personal display. Message from the Curiosity's price. Their ship was ready to depart if they wanted to return to Earth. "Your crew is waiting," Telnox observed. "Let them wait a bit longer," Sarah said. "I want to see what happens when the first generation of students who learn from the obelisk start teaching others. I want to know if this gift keeps giving or if we find a way to ruin it." Optimistic. Telnox clicked with amusement. "Hopeful?" Sarah corrected. "The precursors built their final gift on hope. Seems appropriate that we maintain it." 6 months later, the Curiosity's prize finally departed from Kesvar. Sarah, Marcus, and Keiko stood on the observation deck as the moon grew smaller. The obelisk still visible as a point of light, even from thousands of kilometers away. "Think they'll be okay without us?" Marcus asked. "They'll be fine," Sarah said confidently. "Telnox is a better teacher than any of us, and the obelisk doesn't need human guardians." It waited 8 centuries for someone to tap it twice. It can handle things from here. What do you think happens when we get home? Keiko wondered. Earth is expecting heroes. We're bringing back knowledge that will change everything. We tell them the truth, Sarah said. That we got lucky. That wisdom isn't about being smart enough, but about being humble enough. And that the greatest discovery humanity ever made was realizing that some answers are simple. The ship's engines engaged, warping space around them. Preparing for the jump to faster-than-light travel, Marcus smiled. We traveled 40 light years to teach the galaxy to turn it off and on again. Hey, Keiko laughed. It worked for humanity for centuries. Worked pretty well for the precursors, too. Apparently, Sarah watched the stars streak past as the FDL drive activated. Somewhere behind them, the Obelisk was teaching thousands of beings from hundreds of species, sharing knowledge that had waited epochs to be shared. You know what the strangest part is? She said quietly. The Obelisk didn't choose humans because we're special. It chose us because we were willing to try the simple thing when everyone else was trying to be complicated. That's not a gift. That's a reminder. Reminder of what? Marcus asked. That sometimes the most advanced thing you can do is remember that even the most powerful technology responds to a simple hello. The Curiosity's price jumped to light speed, carrying 3 humans home from the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history behind them, on a moon that had held a secret for 847 years. The Obelisk glowed with the light of 10,000 active interfaces. It had waited so long to wake up.